Ryan, what's on your radar?
Well, at yesterday's White House press briefing, the drumbeats for war banged on, even after Jen Psaki noted she'd been asked the same question about providing fighter jets roughly 167 times.
And I want to go back to the MiGs quickly and just be crystal clear about what you're saying, because when I asked the president about this earlier, he said he's not going to comment. He didn't say that it's not an option. So
well, we've spoken to it approximately 167 times. So maybe
Well, here's 168.
Go ahead.
There's a growing number of Republicans and Democrats who are supporting the U.S. striking a deal with Poland to send the MiGs. You have Elise Stefanik earlier today saying Ukraine needs those MiGs. You have Scalise saying getting those MiGs in immediately is critical. There's a growing chorus of voices saying that now is the time. Has the president reconsidered his stance at all at this point?
No, because our military makes assessments, which they put out that assessment last week, and I would just echo that one part of the assessment is based on what equipment is effective in fighting this war, anti-armor and air defense systems. They are effectively defending the country. That is what we have provided additional assistance on. Second, they have several squadrons of mission-capable aircraft.
I don't think that's enough, Jen. You heard President
that are
Zelensky
not being,
very
Kristen, that are not being utilized. This is the assessment by our Defense Department. Third, they are also assessing that the transfer to Ukraine may be mistaken as escalatory. So this is how our Defense Department is assessing. They are assessing also that it would not significantly change the effectiveness of the Ukrainian Air Force. And these are the types of risk assessments we certainly understand. We share the passion, the anger, the horror at what we're seeing. And that is why we significantly increase the types of military assistance, the types of equipment that we know is effective, and our Defense Department is determined is effective in fighting this war.
The press corps continued asking about those jets, but also made a more general appeal for just more war.
You have noted from the podium that Putin has shown no signs of changing course. You've also noted that there are significant consequences that Putin could still face. Even with this additional aid that you're providing today, it seems there are still other options on the table. So why hold back? Why not use every tool at your disposal now to spare additional lives?
Well, I think if you look at the range of tools that we've used to date, we have implemented more economic sanctions than we have on any other economy in the world. You could compare it potentially to Iran or maybe North Korea, but Russia is a much more significant economy, a larger economy. And so I wouldn't say that we are holding back in that sense. We do have additional steps we can take, as we've talked about a bit in here before. Obviously, the SWIFT banking system and the implementation of those sanctions happens institution by institution. There are additional individuals that can be sanctioned. We can have new targets. We can deepen the severity of sanctions on existing targets. We can further eject Russia from the international economic order. We can further deny Russia the capacity to modernize and diversify its economy, like we have with the export controls and the cutting off of access to a lot of technology. And we can further expose and hold to account the kleptocracy. These are additional actions we have, additional options we have, and we can take them, and that is a decision that we would make through a discussion internally.
But what are you waiting for?
What are you waiting for? Can you imagine if the press covered climate change like this, or the expiration of the child tax credit, or the Saudi and UAE war on Yemen that has led to hundreds of thousands of deaths, or the seizure of Afghanistan's central bank reserves? But all of that was actually tame compared to the last question of the day. Watch as this reporter stops Jen Psaki so that he can answer his own question with the answer he's looking for.
Right, go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. You put out a list of all of the military equipment included in that $800 million that's being provided to Ukraine. Among those items, let me read them to you: 100 grenade launchers, 5,000 rifles, 1,000 pistols, 400 machine guns, and 400 shotguns. Are you saying those items are not offensive weapons?
They're weapons that help the Ukrainian people fight against an invasion by a foreign country.
They can be used offensively, can they not?
Again, they're weapons. What I'm talking about is weapons that can be used to fight.
The answer is yes. I mean, although you don't want to say it, that answer to that question is yes. And so obviously you're trying to make this distinction between offensive.
Well, what we're
and
talking about,
defensive
let me finish,
weapons.
let me finish.
Well, let me finish.
Let me
'cause I'm
finish,
making my
let me
point.
finish my
You make-
answer.
No, you are, no, I was finishing a point, and then you can respond to my
Okay,
answer.
go ahead.
All right, you're making this distinction between offensive and defensive weapons. Anybody that looks at that list of weapons that I just mentioned, they would say, clearly they're offensive. If a Ukrainian military officer or someone who is enlisted has one of these weapons, they can take out a Russian military official of some sort with these weapons. They're offensive in nature. So why not provide more offensive weapons like this to the Ukrainian military?
Well, first of all, we are providing a range of rifles, et cetera. There is a difference between a plane and planes and massive military systems. I think anybody would recognize this. And what we're talking about, which is giving rifles and pistols to many of them farmers and people living in countrysides to defend themselves. I think there's a difference that most people recognize. Thank you, everyone, so much.
That question asker is not totally wrong in that yet those weapons, right, there's not, a gun is a gun.
You can shoot somebody with a gun.
Sure.
Right, and if you, it's that Ukraine is in a defensive position, so it's using these weapons defensively, but whether they're offensive or defensive in nature is not, really the distinction here is that giving them these weapons or helping Ukraine in this way is not, we've decided, going to be perceived as an act of war by Russia, whereas giving them other weapons or doing other things would be perceived as an act of war. That's the difference. And yes, it's not, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's just what it is. That this is the line where these things, we've all agreed, we and Russia agree, are war with Russia, and these things are not. So we're doing these things.
And one place, and I'm curious for your take on this, one place that does make some real world sense would be if you've got a pistol, you got a grenade launcher, you have an anti-aircraft piece of, you got a javelin, those are only going to be able to kill a Russian if the Russian comes into Ukraine.
Right.
Like from Kyiv, you can't kill any Russian.
But I guess a pistol can only kill a Russian if they're invading you. And
he was like, you could shoot an officer or an official with a gun. Yes, you can shoot somebody with a gun. That's true. But you'd have to go up to them.
Right.
So you'd have to go into Russia with your javelin.
Right.
And then go to a base and shoot a tank with it. Right. And especially an anti-aircraft weapon is only going to be useful
if there's an aircraft like actually coming after you. Right.
Whereas with a plane, that can be over Moscow in 3 minutes, and you've heard Putin repeatedly complain about, I could be bombed in 3 minutes. Like that's one of the things he's used as his justification for why he had to invade. These long-range missiles and planes can be used much more easily offensively than a handgun you give to a farmer.
And more importantly, actually, and what Jen Psaki, well, she probably can't really say this, I guess, out loud in a press conference, otherwise she'll get in trouble, but Putin's the one who's deciding what's offensive or defensive right now.
Yeah.
He's the one making the list.
Yeah.
So he says, these are the weapons that I consider offensive. These are the weapons I consider defensive.
Right. Yes, that's what I said. Yeah, exactly. I agree. Yeah.
Right.
And it doesn't make any sense, but it's
so it's up to him. He decides. So what if he believes that, okay, pistols, rifles, grenade launchers, whatever, are more defensive, then that's his decision. But this journalist who's trying to push the Biden administration saying, no, these are offensive. You can go kill people with these, so why not give them more offensive weapons? Well, it's not. And why are you classifying certain weapons as offensive versus defensive? No, Putin is deciding.
Clearly, the press was trying to trick her into admitting that we're already in a war with Russia, at which point, why don't we just create
Go to
a
war
no-fly
with
zone
Russia.
since we're already in That's what they were trying to establish, which is not the case. We are not in a war with Russia. We don't want to be in a war with Russia. The current situation does not call for us to be in a war with Russia if it remains the current situation. So we should not escalate. And in fact, most people in Congress and most of the country and the Biden administration all agree that we should not escalate it in that way.
Except for that room.
That room wants us to escalate it very badly.
Why are all of these journalists all about, why are they so warmongery?
It's a good question. We got to get Philip on. He knows them a lot. He works with them every day. I'm only there. I was there for that one. I didn't get a question in. I'm only there once or twice a week. Philip's there all the time. So I'd be, we could bring some of the other ones on and ask them, do you not think, I guess they think that it's not going to lead to nuclear war. Like, that's the only thing I can get my head around, that they just don't believe.
Right. Because they do understand. They have to know what a no-fly zone is. Like, I understand that some people who answer these polls don't get that, like, no-fly zone sounds very benign. Like, oh yeah, just nobody would be
flying. Don't fly there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not a magic bubble. Like, it's us shooting down Russian planes.
Right.
And they must be convinced that we would shoot down a Russian plane and that Russia would not, and that there's no way that it spirals into a nuclear war. That,
Right.
Or I don't know.
Maybe it only spirals into a nuclear war in Europe, I guess. So
How long do you think the press room lasts in a nuclear war? I mean, come on, the White House?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who do you
That's
think's being targeted? I mean,
You
even
gotta-
what we're seeing, who
we're
Russia's
just confident
targeting in
they
Ukraine.
can't hit DC. I
Can
think we're
you? Would you even be able to file your last dispatch in the 5-minute warning you have that you're about to be incinerated?
What would be your last tweet before it goes down? Who would be the last person you try to cancel or something?
Got to agonize over that tweet. It better be good.
They'd all be like, oh, there's some problematic stuff.
And then you send it and you see a typo.
No.
No.
All right. Well, I think Robbie's next.
I think so.
Looking forward to your radar.